Good morning, everyone. It's now 10 o'clock and we're ready to start our Tree School online webinar for this morning. I'm Mike Clossy, Director of Forestry with the Oregon Forest Resources Institute, and it's my pleasure to be your host for today's Tree School online webinar. Tree School Online is a production of the OSU Forestry and Natural Resource Extension Program and the Partnership for Forestry Education. We want to give special recognition to OFRE for leading this project and to the U.S. Forest Service and the Oregon Department of Forestry for giving us a grant to cover our expenses. Tree School online webinars are scheduled every Tuesday from now until July 28th. We'll be holding 2 sessions each Tuesday. One's at 10 a.m. and one is at 3 p.m. I want to talk a little bit, just housekeeping before we get into the show. If you scroll your cursor around with your mouse and you come across the bottom, there should be the Zoom toolbar pops up. And this is where most of the things that you need to use today are located. Now on some systems, like on an iPad, the toolbar is at the top instead of at the bottom, but on a laptop or most computers, it's on the bottom. So on the left side, you see the microphone and it should say muted. Unless I unmute you and you also unmute yourself, it's muted the whole time for participants. Also next to that is a video, and your video should not be available. Only panelists and the host. After that, you come across the participant list. And this, if you can see that right now, it says 62 of us are watching. That will go up and down as people log on or log off. It also is a way to see who they are. So if you click on that, you can see the list of the panelists, which are 5, and the list of attendees, which are 58. So that's the panelists, participants. After that is the Q&A. And we're having, on this webinar, there's 2 opportunities for the Q&A. One is to if you hit the Q&A button, there's a place where you can type in your question, and we can answer it either typing it or we can answer it online. The other thing that we're doing in this one is we're going to take audio questions. And if you have an audio question, a verbal question that you would like to ask, because sometimes property tax is a little hard to write about, it might be easier to ask a verbal question. So there's a place where you can raise your hand. And when you raise your hand for us, it shows up who's raised their hand. See Bruce Bull just raised his hand. If that is shown, then when we get to an opportune time, we'll go open the list up and say, okay, we're going to take a couple questions. Bruce had one. Then I will unmute Bruce. He can ask his question to the panelist, and then we'll move on. So we wanted to try it that way, but you can also do it in the Q&A. The other resource that we often have, and you can see right now in chat, there's messages. We are asking you not to use chat for the Q&A. The chat is really where we want you to ask if you have a problem or something like that. You can do it in chat if for some reason you can't hear us or something else. Glenn is monitoring the chat and he can try to fix that. Chat is also a way that you can send messages to individual participants, individual panelists, or you can send a message to everyone. But we'll try not to use that for questions because it's easier to manage the Q&A. The other thing we have, you know that when you take a tree school class, and this is supposed to be just like a tree school class except online, is there are resources that you can get. The instructors often have handouts. The resources in this case are on the website. You have to go to the knowyourforest.org or the OSU Extension Tree School Online website, and then you can go to the description of the webinar, and above the description is a button for resources, and that's where you can get your resources. Couple more things. We are recording this webinar, so at the end of it, it will be changed into a YouTube file and stored on the knowyourforest.com, knowyourforest.org website, and also on the Tree School online website. So you'll be able to have access to it later, or if someone missed it, they can go back and do it. All of our webinars are being archived that way, so that should be good. The final thing I want to talk about is polls. And during this show, we'll do a couple different polls, and it should pop up when I do the polls, and you'll have a chance to click on the answers. If it doesn't pop up, there's also a polls button on your website, on your toolbar, which right now won't do anything if you press on it. But when I have a poll posted, if it doesn't pop up on you, you can go to that polls button, click it, and then you'll get it. So that's really all I have for Q&A. So I'm going to ask our panelists to join us. We have three excellent people from the Clackamas County Assessor's Office. We have Bronson Ruda, who is the Deputy Assessor, LYNN Longfellow, who is the Appraisal Manager, and also Tony Hunter, who is Senior Appraiser. So I don't see Tony on yet. Let's see if I can get him up. Tony. Video. Start video, please, Tony, and I will unmute him. So we should be able to hear him. So, and there he is. Welcome, Tony. Welcome all. Thank you so much for being here today. I think we've got a great webinar, and I'm going to turn it over to Bronson, and he will tell us what we're going to talk about today, and then we'll eventually get to a poll question.
Okay, welcome to Tree School, everyone. The Clackamas County Assessment and Taxation Department is very happy to be here. Let's start off with some introductions from your presenters. I'll go first. My name is Bronson Rueda, and I'm the Deputy Assessor and have been with the Assessment and Taxation Office for a little over a year. And I'm excited about that because I'm officially past my trial service period. Prior to my time at Clackamas County, I spent 8 years at the Oregon Department of Revenue and the Property Tax Division, where I held various positions, the last one being the Valuation Section Manager. And in that role, I managed about 50 appraisers. And prior to my time at the Oregon Department of Revenue, I spent 9 years as a commercial fee appraiser. The last 5 years of those, I managed a team of appraisers that focused on office and medical office valuations in Oregon, mostly for financing purposes. All right, next we have LYNN Longfellow, the Appraisal Manager.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Tree School. I'm very excited to be here. As Bronson said, my name is LYNN Longfellow. I am the Appraisal Manager at the Clackamas County Assessor's Office. I've been with the county about 17 years, and I started in the Farm Forest section. Got my feet wet with all of this information we're going to share with you then. This is my third tree school, and I have to say I love tree school. So even though we're doing it differently this year, I'm tickled to be here, and welcome to you all.
All right, thank you, Lynn. Next, we have a tree school fan favorite, Tony Hunter.
Good morning, everybody. I'm on. I can't see anything right now.
You're on.
Hunter. Is the video going with me?
Yes.
Yeah, you're on.
Okay. I'm Tony Hunter. I've been with the Clackamas County Assessor's Office for a little over 30 years right now. I've been in the Farm Forest section for majority of that time. I've been a senior appraiser for a number of years there. I've done tree school for about 28 years of that or so. I've done most of the tree schools one way or the other, either by myself or with another senior appraiser who was ahead of me. That's my background with Clackamas County. I also have a background in construction prior to that. So very happy to be here with y'all.
All right, thanks, Tony. Next slide, please, Lynn. All right, here's what we are going to be covering today. We're going to be going through the Oregon's property tax system, Measure 50 and Measure 5, Forestland Special Assessment, both qualifying and disqualification, fire patrol, harvest and severance tax, and then questions and answers. But please note, feel free to ask questions anytime throughout this class. Just follow the protocol that Mike has outlined earlier. All right, Lynn, next slide. All right, poll question time.
It is poll time. It should be coming up on your screen. If it doesn't, click the button at the bottom, you should now see in progress, where are you from, about yourself, how many acres of forest land do you manage, and question 4 is, what is Measure 50? So you should be able to answer these now, and right now 0% have voted, so hopefully you're voting. All right, we're getting some voters. And when it looks like a lot of you, we have right now about 74 of you that have the potential to vote. So when we get a lot of the people that voted, I will share the results and then we can talk a little bit about them. Also, just to note that if you click on the top of the voting box, the polling box, you can move it all over in case it's like covering our faces and you don't want it to. Or conversely, if you want to cover our faces, you could. But we're thinking that's not the case. All right, 50 of you have voted. Everyone doesn't vote, I've noticed. That's the way life is. But if it's not popping up for you, again, down at the bottom of the screen, in the toolbar, there's a thing that says polls, and you should be able to click on that. And we have a question from Jason that we'll get to in a bit. All right, I'm going to end polling there. It's been 1 minute and 30 seconds and 72% of you have voted. So here are the results. And let me pull this off to the side. So most of you are from the Willamette Valley, as you might expect. Though we do have some from the coast, not many in Southwest, less in Washington State, which makes sense for this one. Since we're talking about Oregon's tax laws, less Washingtonians would be interested. Many of you are woodland owners, 74%, but also some resource professionals and some others. In terms of the acres that you manage, many of you don't yet, 10 acres or less. The big numbers are at 10 to 40 acres. And then the results of what is ballot measure 50, there were, and this is interesting, all of the, I only get answers. Oh, there's 4 questions. Okay, sorry. So a tax deferral program for forest landowners, 77% thought that. Part of Oregon's constitutional tax system that shaped the property tax system, 21%. The ability of a seasoned appraiser to actually pace off 50 feet without using a measuring device. None of you were fooled by that trick answer. And an opportunity for a property tax owner to pay twice the amount of property tax they actually owe. Only 2% believe that. So I think that the right answer is B, and 77% thought it was A. So let me turn it back to Bronson and see what you guys say.
All right, good. Thanks, Mike. So yes, the correct answer is B, part of Oregon's constitution that has shaped our property tax system. And hopefully during the course of this presentation, that will become more clear. And I do find it interesting that most people thought it was the property tax deferral program for forest landowners. I don't know if that's just because it was the first option available, people clicked on it, or not, but we'll go over this and enlighten everybody. So Lynn, next slide, please. Lynn, next slide.
I did.
Okay, thank you. Oh, that's fine. You can. It looks like there's a lag in slides, so go back a couple slides, Lynn. All right, here we are. The first topic: Oregon's property tax system, Measure 50 and Measure 5 summary. Even though this class focuses on forest land, it is important to understand the basics first. Measure 50 and Measure 5 are 2 constitutional amendments passed by Oregon voters. All right, next slide, Lynn. There seems to be a lag. There we go. All right, before I get into what Measure 50 is, I think it's important to understand why we have Measure 50. Prior to Measure 50, taxes were based on the market value of property. And as you know, market values can fluctuate up or down in any given year. Thus, property taxes fluctuated up and down accordingly, creating a property tax environment that was unpredictable. Well, the voters of Oregon wanted more predictability or consistency in their property taxes, so Measure 50 was born. Now back to the slide, there are 3 bullets summarizing Measure 50. We will go into more detail in the next few slides, but this gives a broad overview of Measure 50. As you can see, the first bullet gives the answer to the poll question. Measure 50 is a constitutional amendment that helps control the amount of property tax an owner pays, hence creating the desired predictability. And this measure shaped our property tax system to what we have today. Some may say to a more complicated degree than necessary, but it is what the voters approved over 20 years ago in 1997. Now let's get into some of the details of Measure 50. Next slide, there you go. Okay, so how does Measure 50 work? If you are seeing or hearing this information for the first time, or even the 20th time, this can get very confusing. Due to this, I'm going to more or less read the next couple of slides to try to mitigate any confusion. So on here, number 1, when Measure 50 was passed in 1997, maximum assessed value was created. Maximum assessed value is also referred to as MAV or MAV. MAV equaled 90% of the 1995-96 real market value. Real market value is also known as RMV. So we've got a couple of acronyms here that you guys are going to want to memorize, MAV and RMV. Number 2, going forward, Measure 50 limited future growth on MAV to 3% per year, with some exceptions, like new construction, remodeling, new subdivisions, and rezoning. Number 3, Measure 50 established permanent tax rates for all local taxing districts with existing tax bases and serial levies. Number 4, Measure 50 allowed voters to approve new short-term local option levies to fund additional services or approve bond measures for capital improvements. All right, any questions out there so far? If not, just remember the acronyms going forward: MAV, maximum assessed value, MAV, and RMV, real market value, because we'll be using those.
There is a question from Jason Pompeo. Jason Pompel. So I'm turning on. Jason, you should be allowed to talk. Well, I think you have to unmute it yourself. Maybe it shows you're still muted. I click. Nope, I don't think that's going to work. Sorry, Jason. You may just need to type in your question, and I'll turn it back to Bronson and say, go on. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mike. Here go ahead, Lynn.
Yes.
We do have a comment that someone has asked to go a little slower on the slides and act like we don't know because they don't know. And thank you for that feedback.
Thank you for that feedback. Yes.
Yeah, this is a lot of information that you're getting, and it is difficult to know how fast people are absorbing it. So we'll slow down. I'll slow down a little bit. All right, what are my taxes based on? So it's important to understand 2 items which are covered in the first 2 bullets of this slide. 1, property in Oregon is not taxed on real market value, or RMV. 2, property taxes in Oregon are based on calculated Measure 50 assessed value. So now, for those familiar with California's Proposition 13, which was established in the late 1970s, in Oregon, market value does not reset when property is sold. And finally, taxes in Oregon are calculated on assessed value, which is the lesser of RMV or MAV, real market value or maximum assessed value. I know there's a lot to keep track of, but here's the bottom line. Typically, the MAV or MAV is equal to the AV, assessed value, which is what taxes are based on. So if the MAV can only go up 3% per year, with some exceptions, this creates the predictability of property taxes, which is what Oregon voters were looking for. One more thing to think about. If you're saying to yourself, well, if MAV can only go up 3%, why do my property taxes sometimes go up more than 3% in a year? One answer is new construction or remodeling property. Another common answer is that voters in any given taxing district can vote on local option measures or bonds that can increase a property tax bill more than 3%. Any questions out there before we move on to the next slide?
I don't see any.
Okay, and then if it's still going too fast, feel free to make that comment again and we'll work on it. It's a work in progress here. All right, now we're going to go over change property ratio, another acronym. This is referred to as CPR. So what is a change property ratio? Well, remember Measure 50 was enacted back in 1997, and it created a MAV benefit for all property at that time. But what about property built post 1997? How did they get a MAV? Well, for new construction, the assessor's office values the property, which creates the real market value, RMV. Then a CPR, change property ratio, is applied to the RMV, which creates the MAV for that property, providing a benefit similar to property already in existence. The CPR is a ratio of MAV to RMV for specific property types and is calculated every year. We would not apply a residential CPR to a forest land property or vice versa. Forest land has its own CPR. So let's look at an example. Next slide, please. So again, remember, Measure 50 created a tax benefit for properties in existence in 1997. But for new property, it's fair to give that same benefit. Let's say a property owner has 10 acres of forest land and they decide to build an outbuilding on the land used to store equipment, and it's valued at $200,000 real market value. The first bullet point on that slide, $200,000. That's the RMV. We need to give that outbuilding the Measure 50 benefit. So we apply the forest land change property ratio of 0.693 to the RMV. Remember, this outbuilding was not built on residential land, it was built on forest land. So it gets the forest land CPR, not a residential CPR. After applying the forest land CPR, the MAV, or maximum assessed value, is created, which is $138,600. Lastly, taxes are calculated from the assessed value, or AV, and the assessed value equals the lesser of RMV or MAV. It's the lesser of RMV or MAV. In this example, the MAV is lower than the RMV. So the property has an assessed value of $138,600. This creates a Measure 50 tax benefit similar to other properties already in existence. All right, next slide. Okay, here is a list and history of the Clackamas County's CPRs since 2012. Take a look at the column labeled 6XX Forest Land. It's the fourth one over from the right. Displayed in red font, the CPR for forest land in the 2019-2020 tax year is 0.693. This means that any new property built in 2019 will have that ratio applied to the RMV to create the MAV, maximum assessed value. And as you can see, since 2012, the CPR has steadily decreased. A decrease in CPR happens when property values are rising. If we hit another recession, the CPR will move upward towards 1. All right, any questions on CPR or what we have covered so far with Measure 50?
Yes, there is one here. We'll answer live. What if you built a residential property on a portion of a designated forest land if approved by the county to do so? Does it still get Measure 50 tax benefit and the forest deferral you just described?
Lynn, you want to take that one?
Sure. And the answer is yes, it does. And so if you were zoned timberland and you went through the forest template with planning, we would take an acre out for the home site, and that 1 acre would not qualify for the forest land deferral and would be assessed at market value. And the new home would have a maximum assessed value, or MAV, applied using that 696 ratio for forest land property.
Excellent. Good answer.
Yeah, great answer, Lynn. And I'll just add that if that's an actual situation, or if you have something similar and you do have further questions, you can always call us in the office, and when we open back up, you can come in the office and discuss these things, and we can give you greater detail as much as you want on your personal situation.
Yeah. Let me just add at this time, while our offices are closed, and we'll go over this at the end, the best way to get a hold of us is email us right now.
Okay, thanks, Lynn. If nothing else on Measure 50 or CPR, we'll move on to the next slide.
Nothing else.
Okay. So here we are. Our other constitutional limitation in Oregon is Measure 5. Now, before diving into the details of this slide that you're seeing, let's go over some Measure 5 information. Measure 5 limits the amount of taxes that any one taxpayer can pay. The limits are based on RMV, real market value, and fall into 2 categories. The first category is education, and the second category is general government. The limitation on education is $5 per $1,000 of RMV. And the limitation on general government is $10 per $1,000 of RMV. It is important to note that the tax limitations are applied to RMV, but the actual tax is calculated from assessed value, AV. If the actual tax due goes above the Measure 5 limitations for either category, compression is created. Let's look at the slide now for this example. At the top of the slide, there are 2 values that I will be referring to. The real market value, $584,650, and the assessed value, $452,811. In the next row, there are 4 column headers: Measure 5 limit, tax calculation, tax imposed, and tax compression due to Measure 5. The next row is education, which has a limitation of $5 in tax to every 1,000 of RMV. We have done the math here for you, and if you don't have a calculator handy to double check us, you'll just have to trust us on these numbers. The Measure 5 limit on education, as you can see from the slide, is $2,923.25. This is calculated by dividing 5 by 1,000 and then multiplying the result into the real market value. The next column is the tax calculation. The education tax rate is given near the bottom of the slide under the header Actual Tax Rates, near the bottom, and is 7.2896. This number is per 1,000 of assessed value. Assessed value, again, is near the top, $452,000 and change. The resulting tax owed, shown in the education tax calculation column, is $3,381. But the resulting tax calculation is more than the Measure 5 limitation allows, so the lower number is the tax imposed, represented in the next column. The tax limitation creates compression for this taxpayer in the amount of $377.55, and that's in red up there. The taxpayer is saving money by paying less taxes, but on the flip side, the local school district is receiving less money into their coffers. It's kind of a double-edged sword there. The next row is for general government. Using the same methodology as the education row, you can see that the Measure 5 limit of $5,846.50 is much higher than the tax calculation of $2,715.95. so the taxes imposed are equal to the tax calculation. Therefore, there is no compression for the general government category. The next row is for bonds. Bonds are voted on by the people and are not subject to Measure 5 limitations. In a given year, if all tax rates stay the same and your AV goes up 3%, your assessed value goes up 3%, your property tax bill could still go up by more than 3% if there is a new bond in your tax code area. Now, if you're being exposed to this for the first time, it's a lot to take in. That being said, any questions on Measure 5?
All right, while we're waiting for that, here is a question that came in right when you were started. What if your shed or building falls down? Does your assessed value go down?
That's a good question. Lenny, you want to take that?
Sure. And yes, the answer is yes, as long as you notify us. So if we don't know about it, we don't know to take it off the roll. And that was a change that was done to Measure 50, I believe it was 2012. So if you've taken out a permit to demo an outbuilding or a structure, we get those permits and we will process it. Otherwise, you need to notify us. And there is also an application for an adjustment to your maximum assessed value that you can file if there is something on the tax roll that no longer exists.
All right. This is a follow-up to that one. How about if your trees burn down? Does your assessed value go down?
No, it does not, because we don't value the trees. The assessed value is on the land as highest and best use forest land. So if your trees burn down, you need to replant in order to keep your deferral. And typically, we'll get into that more, the replanting time is 2 years. Now, in case of a fire, I'm sure we would work with you, the forester would work with you, and possibly have a management plan. But we'll address that more further down as well.
All right. And there's one more here. Is the CPR the same for forest land as it is for small tract forest?
The answer is yes, it is.
All right. That's all the questions at this time.
Okay, great. And Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but the participants in this Zoom will have access to take home or download this PowerPoint if they want to?
Absolutely. It's going to be recorded, and it won't be a PowerPoint at that point. It'll be a video, and Zoom makes it into, we get it as an MP4 file, and then we make it into a YouTube file, and we'll post the YouTube. So it's actually easier than watching a webinar, because you just hit it, play, and sit back.
Okay, that way they can, if we're still going too fast, they can pause it later on as they listen back.
Absolutely. Great point.
Okay, great. Next slide, please, Lynn. All right, here's an example of a property tax statement, but here we're going to focus on the right side of the statement. Near the top, in a rectangular outline, it says 2019, 2020 current tax by district. This is a detailed list by taxing district of the property taxes owed. The first 3 lines comprise the education category, followed by the education total. The next grouping of 13 taxing districts is the general government category, followed by the general government total. Remember, these 2 categories are subject to Measure 5 tax limitations. The last group has 3 line items, and notice at the end of those line items it says excluded from limit total. These line items are bonds voted in that are not subject to the Measure 5 tax limitations. Any questions on the sample property tax statement? There'll be other sample property tax statements later on in the presentation that go over other details regarding the forest land values.
All right. This is kind of on the subject, but a little different, and it's a 3-parter. Why did the state send documentation trying to assess the purchase price of the forest land in total, asking for us to divide land value versus tree value? Shouldn't this happen only at the county level? This happened just after closing on new forest land. So they closed on the forest land. They got a statement from the state asking them to split the purchase price in forest land from the trees from the land.
You want me to take that, Bronson? Or,
Well, Tony's got his hand raised. Let's let Tony have a crack at it.
well, the
Take
reason is
it off mute, Tony.
Tony's on mute. The reason is while the county values the real market value, it is the Department of Revenue that establishes the special assessed values for forest land. So that's why you received that sales questionnaire.
And I'll just add what they're trying to do is separate the value of your timber from the land. Anything else to add on that, Tony?
That pretty much covers everything I had on it. They do it every year. They have hearings on that, usually in April of every year, March and April, they have the hearings. That's how that's done every year.
And I also noticed that there are some Department of Revenue people on this Zoom. So Department of Revenue, if you have anything to add on that, I don't know if you have the ability to unmute and chime in or raise your hand, but feel free to jump in there if you have something else to add on that's something under your realm of expertise. So moving on to the next slide, slide 15. All right, so sad news. This is my last slide before I pass the torch to LYNN. And this is a timeline of some of the events for the Assessment and Taxation Department. Note the event in red at the bottom, April 1st, 2020. That was the due date for farm forest deferrals and exemptions. Typically, we present this information at True School, and True School is in advance of that deadline, but this year it didn't work out that way because of the pandemic. But hopefully all of you who wanted to get the application in got it in. But every year, April 1st is the same application deadline. Okay, thank you for your time. And now I hand it over to LYNN to talk in detail about special assessments and exemptions.
Okay, good morning, everyone. So now we will get into the special assessments. I do have a question. Do you folks see my mouse when I move it around?
Yes.
Okay, because I'm going to
see the
use,
cursor, right? The little arrow.
yes, thank you, because I will use that sometimes if I want to point to something. So, and just as Bronson indicated, please ask questions as you go. There is a lot of information to cover. So here we go. Special assessments and exemptions. The property tax system does have several special assessment deferral programs or exemptions listed here. If you're interested in any of these, you can contact our office. Again, the best way to contact us right now is through the email. Too late for this upcoming tax year to apply for these. The deadline on these is April 1st, but keep in mind for next year. But we're going to focus on the forest land deferrals. And it's time for another poll. Mike? Did we lose Mike?
Sorry, we have a question coming in. Do you need to file for the exemption every year or just once?
If you're referring for exemptions, it depends on the type of exemption. So let me go back to the previous slide. If you are applying for a veterans exemption, it may or may not be every year depending upon the amount of disability you have. If it's a veterans exemption as a widow or widower of a vet, the answer is no. So it just depends. On the deferrals, if you're referring to farm or forest land deferral, that is a one-time application, and as long as you continue to qualify, you do not reapply every year.
All right. Then we also have an oral question from Glenn Meyer, and I should be unmuting you, Glenn. So you should be able to, you have to unmute yourself down at the bottom by the microphone. It shows you're still muted. That's all I can do. So this is not working, doing the raising hand and answering the questions this way. So we'll just go back to the other. So sorry, Glenn, if you still have a question, go ahead and type it in and we will move on to the poll. Next slide, please, Lynn. Okay, so I gotta get rid of that poll. Share results, we already did. Stop sharing results. And it should, oh, I see. Sorry about that, I'm learning. This is poll number 2. And I will launch it. Says, is your property currently in the Forestland Special Assessment Program? Yes or no?
Or I'm not sure.
Exactly.
You would be surprised how many folks that we hear from that they are unsure of whether or not their property is in deferral.
Yeah, you can't see this, but so far I'm not sure is just behind yes. So we'll see. We got, when we get up to 60 people voting, I will do it because there are now 73 people that have the capability of voting. And
Hey, Lynn, while we're waiting, what's a couple ways that people can find out for sure whether they're in or out of the Forestland Special Assessment Program?
I'm going to tell them that. It's coming up.
all right. Well, we'll stop right there and you'll see the results. So it says that 47%, 26 of our people said yes, 20% said no, and a full third were not sure. So I think they want to know the answer to this question, Lynn. How can they find out?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways you can find out. One, you can look on your tax statement, and I will show you where it shows you on the tax statement if you were in Forestland deferral. You can also go on to our website and search your property and look for the property characteristics, and there will be a note that there's an additional liability for a deferral program. So that's another way. And you can always contact us if you still can't find the answer. But when I go through the tax statements, I think you'll see that it's pretty apparent whether or not you're in forced deferral or not. Okay? Okay, so that was our poll. So now, the Forestland Special Assessment Program. What is it? So this is where Tony and I kind of tag team here. Tony will jump in and let me know if I misspeak or fail to share some information that is important. So it is a deferral program used predominantly to grow and harvest trees of a marketable species. And the marketable species is important, and those include ash, white oak, big leaf maple, red alder, cottonwood, and all conifers except for the Monterey cypress. The other thing that's really important to note, grow and harvest trees. The city of Damascus here in Clackamas County, when it was a city, they had proposed an ordinance to ban cutting trees down. They wanted to preserve the canopy. Well, that sounds nice and lovely, but we notified them that if they enacted this ordinance, any property within the city limits would have to be removed from the Forestland Special Assessment because the purpose is to grow and harvest trees. So the land is valued for its use growing trees, and that can be significantly different than your market value. And we'll go over those values. Again, the application time is January 1st to April 1st. That's when you apply for deferral. There also is a provision we call a rollover provision that if you were disqualified for some reason, you have 30 days outside of this window to apply for another program. The other thing in order to qualify is the land must meet the minimum stocking requirements. And that starts at 200 seedlings per year. So we get inquiries from folks who want to turn their land into forest land. They have to plant 200 seedlings per acre. It's also 120 trees per acre if they're 10-inch, the DBH. And so, you know, this, a dinner plate, you know, this is 11 inches in diameter. So, you know, that's what that is based on for stocking requirements. So again, a picture of a recent harvest. I bring this up because in order to qualify for the program, you have to grow and harvest when the trees are ready for harvest, and that could be years from now. And then there's replanting requirements. So we have two programs. There's the Forestland program, which is at 100%, and someone already mentioned the small tract forestland or the 20% program. So two Forestland programs. And here are the qualifications. So the basic requirements. So on the 100% forest land, you must have a minimum of 2 acres of forest land, again used for growing and harvesting trees. The application period, January 1, April 1, you apply to your county's assessor's office. It must meet the stocking standards. And then you apply in the regular time with that one rollover option. And if you're disqualified, that happens between January, excuse me, between July and by August 1st. And then lastly is harvest tax and severance tax. So there is no severance tax if you're on the 100% forest land. There is harvest tax over 25,000. Oops. On the small tract forest land, the acreage requirement is 10 acres. You must have at least 10 acres of forest land and up to 4,999. So the really large ownerships of over 5,000 acres do not qualify for small tract. The application period's the same. You file with the assessor's office. And it again has to meet the stocking requirements. One thing that's different on small tract forest land. So when your property is in deferral, the deferral runs with the land. That means when the property sells, the deferral goes with it. It's not disqualified. However, if you're in small tract forest land, new owners have to reapply for small tract forest land. So just something to know. And we monitor those, and we will send out letters to new owners of small tract forest land to let them know that they need to reapply or they will be disqualified from the small tract still, and then we'll move them into the 100% forest land. The other thing to know on small tract forest land is that yes, there is a severance tax due at harvest. So what we advise people is that if you're looking to move into small tract forest land, but you think you're going to harvest your trees in a year or two, small tract forest land is not the program for you. However, if you've just replanted 50 acres and you don't anticipate harvest for 20 years, that might be a great program for you and save you a little bit more on taxes.
All right, we have a question here.
Okay.
How can you tell if your land is in the small tract or if it's 100% forest land?
On the tax statement, you know, does it say small tract forest land if you're in small tract, Tony? Or, okay. So I'll show you in a minute on the tax statement where it says forest deferral. So if it's in small tract, it will tell you small tract forest program.
Okay, and then a follow-up on that, excuse me, is it 100% required to the whole tax lot, or is it just 100% of part of the tax lot?
Well, it depends. In order for the acreage requirements, it has to be contiguous acres. So if you have a 5-acre parcel and say your home site's in the middle of it, and you have 1 acre over on this side and 1 acre over on this side, that would not qualify. They have to be contiguous. But you can have just 2 acres of your 5-acre parcel have the trees and it would qualify. So the answer would be no, it does not have to be the entire tax lot, but it is that many acres in trees contiguous. One
Right.
question, and I'll just add as a follow-up, on the small tract, there's a lot of 10-acre parcels out there, and people want to go into that small tract. However, if they have a dwelling, home site, we always take an acre out for the home site. So therefore, they only have 9 acres of trees, not the 10, and they don't qualify for small tract.
One more question on small tract. What if I put it in small tract and then never harvested?
Well, then as long as you don't cut the trees, you maintain the deferral. So the question would be, why aren't you harvesting? Is it just because they're not ready? If your intent is to put it in forest land and you never want to cut your trees down, and you tell us that, and the forester knows that, you may not qualify for the program. So, we realize that, I don't know, Tony, what's the average plant harvest time after they plant? 15, 20 years, depends on the tree.
Yeah, usually you're looking at 30 years, somewhere 25 to 30 years. That's about the typical, one of the old programs that went away, that's where it was set up at, is to harvest in 30 years, which is what the small tract replaced that program, but that was an option program.
Yeah. So, again, trees take a long time to grow. And, it's not anticipated that, or it's not unusual that someone would be in the program 20 or 30 years and not harvest. And you would still continue to qualify. Okay, if there's no more questions there. So this is a circular, I believe the Department of Revenue puts this out, where it talks about the stocking requirements. So, 200 per acres on seedlings, 120 acres per tree on the 10 inches, and an 80 square foot, a basal area per acre. So if it's 11 inches DBH. When you measure, I put this little picture here because they say you measure the tree at breast height. Well, that's typically 4.5 feet. Depends on how tall you are, I guess exactly, where that would be. But this is where you measure, is at 4.5 feet there.
Just an interesting point here, Lynn, is those requirements, the 200 seedlings per acre, 120 poles, or 80 square feet of large trees, that's exactly what the requirements are for the forest practices rules. If you have less stocking than that, you would need to reforest. So I'm sure that's where this came from.
That's a good point, and I'm glad you brought that up, because the next slide talks about responsibilities, because when you are in the Forestland program, you are adhering to the Oregon Forest Practices Act. I think I said that right. So we have some questions, Mike?
We do. There are 3 of them. Excuse me. The first one is for the minimum trees per acre. If you're growing larger trees and have already thinned, are you going to a second thinning? Is it still a minimum of 120? And I'll see if you want to answer that one.
Yeah, and I'll let Tony jump in here too. You have to meet the total stocking requirement. So if you've thinned, but you still have saplings or poles, you would need to meet that requirement, but you may have larger trees as well. So, Tony?
Yeah, it can be a combination of the saplings, seedlings, and basal feet, to come up with all of that, because your basal feet, might be your biggest area, because 80 square feet per acre isn't a lot of trees when you stock in big trees.
Right.
Okay, kind of a follow-up to that. What's the advantage of small tract versus 100% forest land? Why would people want to do that?
The small tract pays a lesser assessed value. I remember I called it 100% and 20%. So the small tract forest land pays 20% of what the 100% forest land program pays. And in a couple slides, I have the different values. And it's not a whole lot of difference on small acreage.
One more question, and this has to do back with the stalking again. Do tax appraisers understand the regenerative forest methods, clear cutting versus selecting harvest? And how would you apply the Doug fir stalking to other species like hardwoods? Is it kind of one size fits all, or how do you guys make the adjustments? I think this is probably for Tony.
Yeah.
Basically, trees per acre, you're regardless of what the variety is, as long as you're a qualifying variety, it's not going to make any difference. And you're still talking the same thing with the saplings. Some of your hardwoods might not, reach the large diameter of your Doug firs and hemlocks or stuff like that, but they're still going to be looked at the same.
I would also add to that, Mike, and for the audience, is that we're not foresters. You're absolutely right. We're not foresters, but we do administer the special assessment program. We do receive training from the Department of Revenue. They have a farm forest section and they provide training. We also work very closely with the state forester. So if we have a property and we're questioning whether or not they qualify, either stocking requirements or species, that kind of thing, we'll ask the forester to go take a look and advise us on whether or not they qualify.
All right, thank you.
Sure. Okay, so this is where we start talking about responsibilities. So the landowner responsibilities. So when you do put your property, or if your property is in forest land deferral, your land is subject to the Forest Practices Act, the rules and regulations, like replanting. I don't know how many of you, there's sure been a lot of commercials on TV lately about the forest land and talking about replanting, and you hear that gal saying it's the law, because it is the law. So I'd encourage you, locate your nearest state forestry office. They're a great resource. The extension office, our hosts of Tree School, they're great resource as well. And when you are in forest land, that you do need to obtain the proper permits when conducting certain operations, pesticide applications, harvesting, that kind of thing. Okay, the state forester has responsibilities as well. They identify the land that doesn't meet the state stocking requirements, kind of the question we had earlier. And they may ask for an owner's management plan, or that notify you that you need to create a plan. And they notify the owner if there's maintenance issues, protection from fire, insects, disease, all of that kind of thing. And they will notify us if the land no longer qualifies for special assessment. And we are required by statute, by law, to remove property from forest deferral if the forester notifies us to do that. On that same note, I would say that our experience, and Tony, you jump in here, is that certainly our office and the state forester will work with property owners to help you maintain your deferral. We want to see folks in the program.
That, that's enforcement is all we do, and that's what the state forester does as well. Just try to make sure that they maintain their stocking requirements.
Right. Now, I know in tree school over the last couple of years, I heard from several folks there was a shortage of seedlings, and due to all the fires and drought, there was shortage. And so maybe folks couldn't get their hands on trees to replant right away. And I think the forester granted them maybe some additional time. Okay, that's forester. And then the assessor has responsibilities as well. We monitor these lands that have been approved. Our job in the assessor's office is to administer and apply the statutes governing the property tax system. We do inspections for stocking and spacing requirements. We'll do inspections when you apply for forest land. We come out and do an inspection to make sure it qualifies. We use aerial photos, that kind of thing. We're looking for the species, stocking. We maintain the ownership information on that small tract forest land. You know, if that property sells, the new owner has to apply to stay in a small tract. And we report this information to the Department of Revenue. And again, we will remove the property from special assessment if certain events occur. So you've qualified, you filed, we've reviewed it, we've inspected it, we've determined it meets the stocking requirements and the species. You know, we've done all that. You've provided a plan if either our office or the forester needed it, and then you're qualified. So what does that mean? I think we've covered most of this real quick. We can approve the application if it meets all of these requirements: acreage, stocking, acceptable species. This is again important: no conditions or covenants that restrict harvesting, and the land has to be capable of producing forest crops. That's all met, we will approve your application. This is a copy of the application that you file. I realize it's kind of small here. I'm not going to spend much time on it. You just fill out your property information. On the back, this is kind of the plot plan. Someone asked if the whole tax lot was not in trees, or could a portion of a tax lot. This is kind of where you draw your site plan and tell us where your trees are. Answer the questions, comes to us, and hopefully we can approve you. Okay, these are the Western Oregon forest land values. Oops. I'm trying to, sorry. Okay, so Bronson talked about Measure 50 and MAV versus real market value, and Measure 5. So on forest land, the Department of Revenue gives us these values every year, and it's based upon the soil class. Again, these are Western Oregon values. I did notice there were some folks from Eastern Oregon. I don't have those values, but I believe they just have 2 soil classes. Is that right, Bronson? I think you said 2. But these are these values. So this first column, M5 SAV value. Forest land also has a value to determine those Measure 5 limits. So this would be like the real market value of the forest land. Then you have your MSAV, which would be the same as your maximum assessed value. So this is maximum special assessed value. That's how I refer to it. Then you have what we call SAVL, which is your special assessed value. And for me, the L stands for lesser. And again, it works the same way as Measure 50. Your assessed value is the lesser of real market value or MAV. Well, when your property's in deferral, the special assessed value is the lesser of the M5 special value or the special assessed value. And you can see in these forest land categories, they're all paying on the special assessed value. So these up here, the OFA, OFB, those are the soil classes for the 100% forest land program. And it says over 5,000 acres, but again, the acreage is from 2 acres to, there's no limit on the upside to qualify for this. The small tract is this down here. And you can see that these numbers, so if I look at soil class A, 100%, 20%, on, if you're in small tract forest land, you're paying $143, or excuse me, you're not paying that. Your assessed value is $143 per acre versus $722 per acre. And again, these are not tax rates. This is the assessed value per acre based upon your soil class. Looks like we have a question, Mike.
Yes, we do. So, and this is a very timely one. If you entered into an agreement, so you got money for carbon sequestration, so you're getting paid for the carbon you're growing, and because you're doing that, you're not able to harvest timber for a while. Do you lose your forest deferral?
I don't know. You know, that's the first I've heard of that. I didn't know they were paying people based upon the carbon. I don't know, Tony.
You're muted, Tony.
I'm not sure. I think they can still qualify for that because they're selling carbon credits is what they're selling there. Replacing somebody else that has had to clear something for a project.
Right, but you still have to, I mean, the purpose of the Forestland program is to grow and harvest.
Well, they can still harvest. They have to get it replanted, so they still maintain a carbon footprint there. So
Yeah.
that's Oregon Practice Act. Anyhow, you have to harvest and replant. So
Right.
why that would, selling the carbon would stop them from getting into the program because they're still going to do harvest. They're still going to replant.
Yeah.
Right. The harvest will be delayed. You may have to wait longer between, and you may have to not harvest as much. But I haven't seen any that don't allow any harvest. And I think that's the key, is that you're still able to have the intent to harvest down the road.
Yeah,
So,
that would, as long as that's it, it would qualify.
good. Thank you. That's the only question.
Okay. So these again are the values. So here's the slide that I wanted to tell you about. Oh, sorry. I have to keep moving the pictures around because it's covering up my slides. So you wanted to know, if you look at your tax statement, how do you know you're in forest land deferral? Well, this first red arrow right here, see it says forest deferral. That's your first clue. This property is in forest deferral. If it would have been in small tract, it would say small tract here. We're pretty sure of that. You're sure of that, Tony? Because I'm unsure of that. Okay, he's nodding. He's muted, but he's nodding. Okay, and then M5 total salve. When you see this number right here, that tells you also that you're in deferral. The reason this is on here, those Measure 5 limits that Bronson went over with you, it's calculated on this M5 salve. So this is a property last year, last year, goodness, was not in deferral. This year, it went into deferral. And you can see that their assessed value went from 434,000 and change down to 161,000 and change. So that was the benefit of them going into deferral. Now, this is a large property. It's over 75 acres. So my guess is a lot of their value is in the land. And as you can see, they only have $12,000 of improvement. So, this property got a significant benefit when they went into the forest land deferral program. So that's how you see it right off the bat on your tax statement. Do we have another question, Mike?
We do, and it's just exactly the right one. If your statement just says farm deferral, does that mean it's not forest deferral? Is there a difference between farm deferral and forest deferral? And is it worth having that separation for the section that is pure timber when the rest is farm?
So, Tony, you want to take it? Go ahead.
Forest land will always take the lead on any of those. So even if you only have the minimum 2 acres of forest land and 50 acres of farm, the forest land will always take the predominant lead on that, and it will always show first. So if yours is showing farm deferral, that's probably what you're under. You could have a small farm woodlot in there, as long as it doesn't exceed 20 acres, which is part of the farm operation. It's not a forest deferral.
Right.
Answer the question, I hope.
I
Yeah.
think so. So to me is, if possible, the farm is lower tax than the forest in most cases.
They're
No.
about the same. There's not a whole lot of difference. You know, when you're talking tax wise, you're talking pennies, you know, per acre. It's
Okay.
very small.
Right. Some of the farmland soil classifications do have a higher assessed value per acre. But if you had both forest and farm, and I do have a tax statement down the road, it would say mixed use up here. If it says mixed use up there, then you do have both forest land and farmland. But
Okay.
farmland only, you're not in forest land.
Right. And that person asked a follow-up. If it's less than 20 acres of forest, is it still considered farm anyway, or could it be in forest?
It could still stay in farm, and that's what Tony was referring to, because in the farm assessment program, there is a provision for a small woodlot. And the small woodlot would be that treed area, but it does need to be less than 20 acres.
Okay, good. That's it for now.
Okay. Okay, so we've covered qualifying for farm deferral, applying, and then, you know, how you can tell that you're in deferral. So next is what happens if you're removed from special assessment. And that can happen for a number of reasons. Maybe the landowner requests that we remove it from forest land deferral. And that does happen. We see it a lot on sales, and that's between the buyer and seller. It doesn't have to come out when the property transfers, but a lot of people want to work that out, and so they ask to remove it. If the property is transferred to an exempt ownership, it will come out of deferral. Also, if you record a subdivision plat under the ORS Chapter 92, that's 4 lots or more, we're required by statute to declass it. Excuse me. That if you just split a lot in 2 or file a partition plat that's less than 4 lots, we're not required to remove it. And then the last reason would be discovery by us that the land no longer is forest land. This is when we would remove it from special assessment. So what happens when we remove it from special assessment? So we calculate, sorry, I have to move my pictures around. We calculate the additional tax that's due. And Bronson went over that change property ratio with you. So what we do is the real market value of the land that was in deferral, we go back 5 years on 100%, excuse me, on 100% forest land. And we apply the CPR. Tony, you want to talk for a minute?
You're muted.
Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the oldest year. We're going to take that real market value of the land, and we're going to CPR that, and that will become your assessed value for those years. So you can see on the slide there, well, you can see on the slide here, there's the rates, the taxes, assessed value, the taxes due on that, and then that will bring forward, will increase that value by 3% going forward up to the current year and then come up with a total for all the 5 years. I got to move Lynn's picture. She's in the middle of my screen there. So that comes up to the $3,735.42 of additional taxes based on that. I don't know, can everybody see that? This was a 2-acre parcel. And another thing that happens a lot of times, like this 2-acre parcel, they do a division, creating a parcel that's less than 2 acres, then that will automatically be a disqualification as well. So that's probably what happened to this one. They created it, they're making a home site on it, so all the acres had to come out. This is about a typical as you can get on that. Lynn, you ready? You okay now? Unmute.
Unmute.
Excuse me, I apologize. Gosh, my eyes are even watering. Okay, so we've calculated this amount and it will be extended to the next tax. Man, excuse me. Right here, you see that amount. It's not subject to measure 50, so, or measure 5 rather. So it's down below in the excluded category. Excuse me. There's no use noted. So you see that. And there's no SAV anymore. And you can see their assessed value went up quite a bit because they're no longer in that program.
The one thing that's important to notice is that that D-class forest amount is a one-time only charge. So a lot of times they need to notify their mortgage company of that so that the mortgage company doesn't raise their rates, their monthly payments going forward for the next year by that amount.
No. Yes, that's a good point because that does happen sometimes. And we can help you write a letter or something to your mortgage company so they understand that's a one-time charge. Looks like we have some questions, Mike.
We do. We got, excuse me, I think it's catching, Lynn. We've got 3 questions. First one, sorry to go back a little, but if timber is a small woodlot on a farm deferral, does it still have the same minimum number of trees or basal area requirements?
No, on a small woodlot, that is an old farm provision, and that's where the farmers would get their wood products that they used around the farm. If it's a good stand of trees that are marketable species, you know, we usually encourage people to try to put that into a forest rather than leave it into the farm woodlot. But no, there is no, for a woodlot, there is no number of trees required.
All right, the next one is talking about when you lost your referral, like in the last example, how far back does do the taxes go when they look backward? Is it from when you first put it in the program, do you pay past taxes, or how far?
Lynn, do you want that on me?
You can take it, Tony. Give my voice a break.
5-year rollback on that. On
5 years, okay.
Forest land, it goes back 10 years for the difference between the 2 programs.
So how about if you lost the deferral and it was going to go back 5 years, but you only own the property for 2 or 3 years? Would you still have to pay all 5 years worth of taxes?
Yes, you bought that liability when you bought the property.
All right. Buyer beware.
That's right. And that's why a lot of people on sale will go ahead and say, oh, I want to declass it and, you know, pay the back tax, and then they might turn around and reapply. And as Tony indicated, on the small tract forest land, it goes back 10 years. But the amount of the D-class is the difference between, say, the 143 and the 722. The tax is calculated on the difference between that.
All right. And the final question is really just a comment, but maybe you guys could respond to it. Not all county tax statements are the same. Polk County, for example, does not list the type of deferral.
Well, that could be. So, you know, we're showing our Clackamas County tax statements and other counties may not. And I don't know quite how to respond to that. I guess then if you need to know if it's 100% or small tract, you need to contact your county assessor's office.
I think that's the answer. Or move to Clackamas.
Yeah, move to Clackamas. We'd love to have you. Okay. So we covered this. And then there's the tax statement, no use noted. Okay, so now that pretty much covers what we have for, excuse me, the qualification and disqualification. The other thing is fire protection charges. Forest land, most forest land is subject to this. And, you know, fires have been terrible in past years, and we've all been in the news, or seen it in the news rather. So there are three types. There's your local fire district, there's a fire patrol tax, and there's a fire patrol surcharge. So your fire district, their charge is based on the taxable assessed value of your property. And they have a permanent rate. They are a taxing district established and have a permanent rate established by Measure 50. It applies to both your land and buildings. And, you know, there also might be bonds or local options that they have asked folks to vote for. So your local fire district. And then there's fire patrol tax. Now, in Clackamas County, we're in the North Cascade Molalla Fire Protection District. And it's a state assessment, and this is not subject to the Measure 5 limits. And it's calculated on a per acre charge. And this year's rate for the 1920 tax year was $1.65 and you know, some change per acre, with a minimum charge of $18.75. So if you only had 2 acres in it, you would pay that $18.75. The charge applies again to the forest. We're in the North Cascade Molalla Fire Protection District in Clackamas County. And the purpose of this is to protect forest land, not structures. Okay. And then there's a fire patrol surcharge. And then again, it's not subject to the Measure 5 limitation, and it's a flat surcharge that applies to any property that's improved, whether it has an outbuilding, a manufactured home, stick-built dwellings. You will have this charge. It shows up on your tax statement. Again, this is for the protection of the forest land, not the structures. So here is a tax statement that has this. So again, this is what I was referring to. See, it says mixed use deferral up here. This property has both farmland and forest land. You can see it's in special assess. Over here is your fire patrol charges. So here's your surcharge of $47.50 because it's improved. You can see right there in the building value. Yep, it's improved. And then it has the fire patrol tax, and this is based on the treed acres. You can see this property is 26.36 acres, but it has just 17.43 acres in trees. And that's what this fire patrol tax is calculated on. So you take that times the rate, and it's $28.86. And you see it right here on your tax statement. Again, it's excluded from the limit. Up here is that first fire district. This property's in Colton. So, you know, FD 70 Colton, that's your fire district that's this property is located in. Make sense?
It does. We have a question just related to that. What does the money that's collected under the fire tax, fire patrol tax, what does that get used for? I mean, who uses it?
Well, it goes to the North Cascade Molalla Fire Protection District. My understanding, you know, we're not the experts on this. We collect the money for them. That they use it, you know, maybe to build roads and have equipment. You know, I can't say 100% what they use it all for, but I'm assuming they use it for fire protection. But you can contact them if you have more questions.
Perfect. Related to that one on this one, where it showed the treat acres, the 17.43. How was that calculated? Was that from an aerial photo or on the ground with GPS, or how did they do that?
We calculated those were the acres that are in the forest deferral program. So when we apply fire patrol to a property, the first acre, we take out because that's going to get this surcharge that it has the structures on it. And then the acres that have trees on it, and this is that calculation, and it was probably done with aerial measurements, that kind of thing. That is what gets that fire patrol tax. The farmland doesn't get the fire patrol tax because it doesn't have the trees and all the burnable material on it. So that fire patrol tax isn't applied to the farmland.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Was that all of the questions? So the other thing I would say about this fire patrol tax, and depending upon what county you're in, because I say we have a lot of folks, the state forester is changing this fire patrol. In some counties already, I believe Clatsop County on the coast, maybe Columbia County, they are going to start sending the counties just a flat rate. If you're in the fire patrol district, you're going to pay a flat rate, and they will send it to us to tell us how much tax to impose on the properties within the district. In Clackamas County, they haven't gotten to us yet. I anticipate maybe in the next couple of years. So, but for now, this is the way it is calculated in Clackamas County. It's important to note it may be different in other counties.
All right, a couple more questions came in while you were answering that one. This one kind of general, but I think it could fit here. Please talk or refer to information on conservation or restoration special assessments, exemptions, or deferrals. I'm looking at a small acreage property that has been trashed and needs restoration. So is there any kind of a program to reduce the taxes because of that?
Do
you want to take it, Tony? You want me to?
No, there's nothing just for restoring the property there to that. There's some conservation easements if you have a creek going across the property or a waterway going across it. But as far as something that's just been trashed, no, there's nothing there. You can sometimes get some initial money to help replant it from the state. They have some programs occasionally, money available there. You just have to check with your local forester to see if there's any funds available for it.
Yeah. I would add on the habitat special assessment program, that is actually administered and approved by ODFW, Fish and Wildlife, and you have to submit a plan to them, and they are the ones that approve it. But I know that there have been no plans submitted or approved in the last several years. And I don't know if they don't have the resources or just what the deal is on that.
All right. Then one more question. This is from a first-year landowner. If I have multiple lots that are contiguous, will I receive only one tax statement for both, or will each one have a tax statement with a similar breakout showing what's what?
You will receive a tax statement for each tax lot that you own. And we do not combine tax lots if they are, each tax lot is a legal lot of record, standalone. If together they make up one legal lot of record, you can contact our office and we can combine the tax lots for you so that you only receive one statement.
All right. And that's it for now. Oh, another one just came in. What is zoned farm versus farm deferral? Is that the same?
Well, we have two different farm deferral programs. One is the UZF, which is unzoned farm. That means your farm is not in EFU zoning, exclusive farm use. So We have exclusive farm use, which is the zone farm special assessment, but there is a special assessment program if your zoning is not farm. The requirements are a little bit different.
And it would say which you're in on your tax statement in Clackamas County.
Tony, does it say UZF versus EFU? That I'm not sure of.
Yes, it does. Your zone farmland does identify zone as a zone farmland. I'm not sure how they identify the unzoned or if they just say farmland.
Okay, similar question for designated forest versus forest deferral. Is that identified on the tax statement?
Yes, that's what we were talking up here, where the first one that we looked at, it said forest deferral. And Tony tells me if you're in small tract forest land, it will say small tract forest deferral.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks.
So this is the last part. I found this picture last night. This is, so you're ready to harvest and ready to send it to the mill. And, there is harvest tax and severance tax. So I thought this was a neat old truck. I wouldn't want to be driving next to it with just the one train holding all those logs on it. Just for information, this picture is from 1936 out of Kinzua, Oregon, which I believe that's how you say it. I'd never heard of it. And it is now a ghost town. In 1978, it was the largest town in Wheeler County and used to have a big mill there, but that's shut down now. Anyway, I thought it was a neat picture, so I thought I'd share it. Okay, harvest tax. So all timber harvested in Oregon is subject to the tax. And that's calculated using the volume of the timber harvested. The first 25,000 board feet per year is exempt. So not per harvest. If you did 2 harvests in a year, it's the 25,000 per year. The legislature sets these rates up annually. And the 2020 rate is $4.13 and 0.22 per thousand. So, people, every tree school I've done, people have asked how many board feet. I found this little calculator to estimate if my math was right, and I'm not going to swear that this is exactly right, but it would take approximately 40 16-foot long with a diameter breast BH of 42 to reach 25,000 board feet. So some of you foresters and loggers, you can tell us if we're wrong, but Tony, does that sound about right?
That sounds about right. A lot of people will take 2 or 3 log trucks off a piece of property a year and never have to pay anything.
Yeah, so.
Many forests are done that way.
Okay. Here's just a history of the rates over the last several years. The rates fluctuate. It's down a little bit from 2019 for this year. And the harvest tax rate is the same, whether Eastern or Western. And then the small tract severance tax. So, if you're an STF, you pay the severance tax, and you pay the severance tax on all of it. That first 25,000 board feet is not excluded. And there's 2 different rates. So the Eastern Oregon rate's 4.78 per 1,000 board feet, and the Western is $6.15. And you must file your return to the Department of Revenue for timber harvested in 2020 by January 31st of 21. So the Department of Revenue administers this harvest tax and severance tax. We do not apply that. And again, here's just a history of the rates of the severance taxes for, the years. Looks like Western has always been a little bit more than Eastern. And with that, that concludes our presentation. If there's any additional questions, we're happy to answer them.
All right, there are a couple, but I'd ask you to go to the last slide because I want to talk about the next show and
Oh, sure.
put up our closing poll. So just before, and we'll take all the questions that you all have, which there's only a couple there now, but I just wanted to, since it is 11:30 and we're supposed to be done, there is another webinar this afternoon that you're welcome to join us on. You'll need to register, and on the chat box, Glenn has where to go to register. It's on the Know Your Forest Tree School online page. It's from 3 to 4:30 this afternoon. But I do have a final poll that I will put up, and we won't show the results of this, but it's something that you all can answer while we're answering the questions. So I will now go to the Q&A, and there's only one left. So if my property tax statement says designated forest land, how is that different from regular forest land? What does designated mean?
That's the 100% program, designated forest land.
So versus the small tract.
Correct. So I'm wondering what county that was in. So
I don't know. We'll see if they're still there and they can Clackamas.
Huh. So ours say designated. The tax statement I had up there didn't say designated.
It may be they just typed designated, but you may not have said that on the tax statement. All right. Well, that's all I've got from, yep, that's all the questions. So thank you all very much. I think this was very informative, and I really want to apologize that the live questions talking didn't do it. I think there was something else I should have clicked in setting up the program to allow the participants to have their microphones, but now I know for next time. But I think we got the questions answered. A couple more have come in. So this one says, mine does. So this is related to the designated. Mine does, but it may be because it's been in the program a long time. And then they also says, same person, why does it say potential additional tax next to the deferral note?
That all properties that are in deferral have that noted on your account, because there is a potential additional tax. If you were disqualified from the program, we're going to go back that 5 years, calculate what you would have paid had you not been in the program, and it will be imposed and collected the following year. So, you know, title companies need that information because it is a potential additional tax.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. Thank you for joining us, audience. Thank you for joining us, Lynn and Tony and Bronson. And I just say 3 cheers for the Clackamas County Assessor's Office. You guys are marvelous. So,
well, thank you. We are always happy to be here. We love Tree School, and please feel free to contact us via email these days if there's any questions.
all right. Well, thank you all, and we will catch you at the next webinar. Bye-bye.
Right.
Bye.